All right, everyone, I'm excited about today's episode. I have on Kaitlin Cueves, and we're going to talk about something that I struggle with a lot personally, which is like time and task management. That's like, I feel like it's been my New Year's resolution for the last few years is to like learn how to manage my time. But she just has a heart for moms and for knowing that it's so easy for us to get overwhelmed when we have kids and we're not sleeping great and we have other things going on. And then you see the mess or the disorganization, or maybe there's not a routine in place. So um, you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and that can add to the chaos. One thing that I learned not too long ago, I mean, I'd say several years ago, was just, which my husband taught me. He's the organized one in the relationship. Like a cluttered space is a cluttered mind, and that is so true for me. Like it's hard for me to concentrate and get stuff done when I'm like, there's crap everywhere. Like, but then there's also like a part of, I have two kids under 3, about to have a third under 3, and there's some things you have to let go, and that's okay. So finding that has been a struggle for me. So I'm really, really excited to chat with you today, Kaitlyn. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I love that, that saying, that mentality that you say your husband taught you. So there's an author and a researcher. Her name's Gretchen Rubin. She studies happiness, the human mind. And she has this saying that is outer order leads to inner calm, which is just the flip side of
Yeah.
a cluttered exterior leads to a cluttered interior. It is so true. That's all I have to say. It is so true.
Yeah, I know. Well, and the hard thing I feel like is like I'm already excited to like we want one more kid, so we might have 4 kids. But then it's like holding on to like this kid stuff forever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like even with this baby coming, I'm like, what can we get rid of? What are we
Hmm.
actually gonna need? What did I not use in my last 2 pregnant like births? Like
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
like after having 2 kids, I'm like, we never once used these 2 larger items that take up space. Like let's just
So
get rid
much
of them.
real
But then I'm
estate.
like, what if this baby does like the swing? Like,
Yeah.
it's
It's
like
You literally took those words right out of my mouth. I was about to say, what if this baby just happens to like the mamaroo and the
right.
others just didn't? But guess what? The
Hmm.
mamaroo is huge. So much
Right.
space.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. We have a Mamaroo. Neither of my kids ever really used it or liked it. And this one, I'm like, I don't know. Should I just get rid of it? Like, or what if baby number 4 likes it? But it's
Yeah.
like taking
Yeah.
up so much space. So, and obviously having kids and doing all that, like, it's a lot. So I'd love for you to, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into all of this, why you're passionate about talking about this, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Kaitlyn. I live in Houston with my husband. We have an almost 3-year-old daughter named Eleanor, who has nicknamed herself Nor, which is
Oh my
maybe
gosh.
the most adorable thing I've ever heard in my life, and a newly 1-year-old son named James. And of course, the glue that holds our entire family together is our golden doodle named Guppy. We just would not be the strong knit family that we are without her. Um, I always feel so funny introducing myself. So I have landed on just sharing a couple of random things that I love. And those are French roast coffee with vanilla almond milk. So good. I have a cup of it right here. To-do lists, exercising, and blocking off weekends for no plans. Like
Oh, I love that.
literally in my calendar, I will block off weekends that we're not going to have any plans. So that's a little bit about me personally. My company, Think Happy Co., I founded just with one primary goal, and that was to help busy women, specifically moms, create sustainable habits, sustainable routines that ultimately lead to reducing their daily stress and decreasing their unproductive time, all in an effort to increase the amount of time that they have to pour into themselves and to keep their own cup full. From the bottom of my heart, I believe that we serve others better when we serve ourselves first. And I think that that's especially true in the life of a mom
Mhm.
because literally 24/7, even when we're sleeping, like we are serving our kids. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. I think it's hard for myself, and I'm sure a ton of people listening, just the concept of we serve others like when we take care of ourselves. Like, still that we live in like a weird society right now where self-care, I mean, you can define it however you want. Um, for me, it's not necessarily like, I don't know. I realized last night that for me, it is like actually taking times to do the things that I love. And like it felt so good last night. I listened to um a birth meditation in the shower, and then I got out and I stretched and I read before bed, and like I didn't even look at my phone. I got to bed at a decent time. And I'm like, man, that makes me feel like so much better than
Yeah.
like I could have like done other things, like
Yeah,
which I had been
absolutely.
doing for a long time, like even just popping on a Netflix show while I'm like getting ready for bed or whatever. Like that wasn't necessarily, it's easy for me just to like numb out or laugh or whatever versus like feeding my spirit. So for
Hmm.
me, like self-care is like almost like spiritual fuel, like feeding myself
Yeah.
with taking time to stretch, to move my body, to um, read a book, whether it's for pleasure or education.
Yeah.
Um, and those aren't things that I take time to do. Like, even when I have downtime during the day, like, how easy is it for us to like reach for our phone and just scroll versus like having something that's like adding value to our life? Um, but it's like such a hard concept because it's like there's such an identity crisis in this time of life
Absolutely.
too. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I care for myself? Some of the things that I used to do, I cannot do right now. Like,
Hmm.
so like, yes, pouring from an empty cup is like impossible, but then how do we like make that time to
Right.
really care for ourselves?
So one thing that before I answer that question, while you were sitting there giving that literal example that happened to you last night, something that I think is really unique about evenings and how we choose to spend our evenings is it directly impacts how our next morning will be because I believe that mornings and evenings kind of work cyclically, if I said that word right. Like, that chart, it's a circle chart with one arrow going up here that leads to another arrow that comes back around. That's how I view our mornings and our evenings. So essentially the way that we end a day is going to impact how we sleep, how our body physically is restoring itself, which plays a huge part in how we feel when we wake up the next morning. And if having some sort of morning time to yourself, um, maybe a morning routine or just a couple of things that you want to do in the morning, if those are going to require you waking up at a certain time or getting out of bed before your kiddos are out of bed, the way you feel, if you feel well rested, if you feel like your body is restored, um, you know, if the snooze is more enticing, then you're probably going to miss out on that time. And that's because of how your night ended. So I just wanted to point that out. Excuse me. When it comes to self-care, I have actually, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I've been thinking about it so much lately, and I've actually found myself in a couple of conversations about it. And I think that the way I see it right now is there's really these two types of self-care, and we get to have both of them. There's this self-care that I feel like has a little bit gotten this negative connotation of just things that aren't always, realistic, going to Target by yourself, getting your nails done, having a girls' weekend, things like that. And I do think that those get to be forms of self-care, but I think that those are the cherry on top of this other type of self-care that should be more ingrained into just our daily lives, things that we are doing every single day to put little splashes back into our cup so that we're not in the situation where we find ourselves pouring from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm.
Because for every mother that is listening right now, you know that you have the ability to pour from an empty cup. There's
Right.
just something in us where we find the ability to do that, but how much better are you going to be able to serve those around you, to serve your kids, to serve your partner? If you're working, to serve your coworkers, whatever commitments you have, your own goals, how much better are we going to be able to serve those when we're not pouring from the empty cup, when we are putting splashes into it throughout the day? And I'll give some examples of what I think those types of self-care could be. So, perfect example, like you gave, listening to something that fuels you, fuels your spirit. That could be music, that could be a podcast, that could be a meditation. Um, Taking a little bit of time to intentionally cut out the screens, replace that with a conversation or time with a journal or a devotional or a walk outside, anything like that. And the thing with this type of self-care is it doesn't have to take a long time. It can
Mm-hmm.
be minutes. And if you do it 2, 3 times a day, that could be 15 whole minutes, which is really awesome. It all adds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I realized too, when I'm like, I don't have time.
Hmm.
I actually do. Like when I look at like how much time I'm spending doing other things that,
Right.
you know, that maybe don't matter or that um isn't fueling me, it's like I do have a few minutes here. I do have a few minutes there. Like I normally don't listen to meditations in the shower. So, and I was like, I don't know. I love Built to Birth, Bridget Taylor. She has really great pregnancy and birth meditations. There was one about connecting to your baby, and I'm like, okay. And it
Oh,
was just
I
nice.
love
It
that.
was sweet,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just intentionally even like taking my shower and connecting with the baby. And so by the time this podcast comes out, I will have a baby. So that'll be exciting. Um, but we do
Isn't
have
that like
time.
weird foreshadowing? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, when we're listening to this,
I
you
know.
will be
We'll
here.
see. We'll see. My 3-year-old's going to be very, very disappointed when she doesn't have a little sister named Moana. So, um,
Oh my God.
she tells everybody that she's having a little sister named Moana. And I'm like, the baby's name's probably not going to be Moana. She's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, okay.
Like, that sounds like a great nickname.
Yes, right. But yes, I do think that we can definitely make time for those things and to fuel us. But I'd like to talk about like the other things that are taking from our energy. Like it is draining when my time and task management like isn't done right. Or like
Yeah.
you feel like
Yeah.
we have those days where I'm like, I didn't sit down today and I got nothing done.
Right. Right. Like
It's
I
like,
was
oh,
going all day long and I
right.
don't know what I have to show for it.
Right. I have those days a lot. Um, but then I'm also like, yeah, it's time and task management has kind of always been hard for me. I've found like a couple of things that do help, like making to-do lists really does help me. And I know that there's like research behind like when you tick them off, like basically
Yeah.
you get like some sort of like dopamine hit.
Yes, 100%. That's why I am the person that if I do something that's not on my to-do list, I will add it to my
Same.
list so I can check it off. But it's that little dopamine hit that you get. And sometimes you need that to, get the ball rolling.
Right, right. So I'd love to talk about like time and task management and kind of how you approach it, especially
Yeah.
in this season of life.
Yeah. So I really view time and task management as going hand in hand when it comes to productivity. And so something that I want to touch on, like at the top of this conversation, is using our unproductive time differently, reallocating that time so that it serves us better. And just like you had mentioned a couple minutes ago, with, we find ourselves saying, well, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And it does feel like you don't have time for that. Like, I don't want to sit here and say, shame on whoever you are. You have just as much time as anyone else, because we are using that time and we are going literally nonstop. But there's an exercise that I like to walk through pretty frequently, and I just call it identifying and reallocating your unproductive time. So essentially, what it does is you sit down, you identify some of the main productivity killers that you have in just your day-to-day life, right? So that could be some of the easy to identify ones, some of the low-hanging fruit, scrolling on our phones, getting sucked into binging a show, whatever it might be. But there's also tricky productivity killers, right? So if you're in the middle of doing something and a kid comes and runs in the room and distracts you, that's a productivity killer from the task that you were doing, because most likely you're going to go help your child. And then when you come back to the task at hand, it's going to take you a second to pick up where you left back off. You lost the flow you were in, whatever you might want to call it. So essentially what this exercise does is it breaks down the productivity killers that you have. It helps you identify the ones that you actually have control over. And it gives you an idea of how much time you truly have available to reallocate to other areas of your life that will serve you better. So those areas that it gets reallocated to could be time that you have for self-care, or it could be time that you have to check some of the things off of your to-do list for that day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I have to say about, the actual physical time that we have. We all have the same amount of it. There is literally no way we can get more, but we can optimize it more, and we can use parts of it in ways that are going to serve us better than others.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes to, the actual task part of this, actually managing the tasks, um, I like to look at task management as having a toolbox of options available for you. And, I don't think that there is just one method or one strategy that is just a blanket going to be so great for everyone. And I think that also in different phases of life, different seasons, different things are going to work better for us, right? We're
Right.
humans, we're fluid. It makes sense that, things like this are going to be fluid also. And so, a couple of suggestions, or I guess I'll start with some things that I use from my own toolbox. And then I can give like some others examples also. So the first suggestion that I do, um, make your to-do list before you're ready to start tackling it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thinking behind this is, when we sit down to start checking things off of a to-do list, most likely we have entered into an A game frame of mind, right? There's certain parts of the day where each of us just are wired to have this A game brain power. Let's not waste that A game power on making the to-do list. Making the list does not require A game power. That can be B game, C game, whatever game. So make your to-do list before you're ready to tackle it is a big one. Another one that I do a lot is, and this one I find very helpful for moms, um, identify your top 1, 2, or 3 priorities for the day from that list. Um, if all else, if everything just, if your day gets totally derailed, what are the few things that were your priorities for that day? And that's going to look different each day. It's going to look different each season of life. For me right now, a lot of times, because I have 2 kids under 3, and, I have my business, and I am the kids' primary caretaker, and, so a lot of times those priorities, one is going to be, serving my clients, some form of serving my clients. Another is probably going to be some form of serving my children. So that could literally be, making sure they get to their well visits on time and, something silly like that. And then a third one is probably going to be something that's more for myself. Um, just to, keep those drops popping into our own cup. And then the third one that I use a lot, I call task grouping. It is different than task batching, which is another really popular technique. And essentially, what this is numbering the tasks on your to-do list in groups of either 3 or 5, to help you make the most, to really truly optimize that you have the time that you have available to be checking things off of your to-do list. So this is the first thing I'm going to do, second and third. After that, it's going to be a great time to take a little break, use a mini reward system, refresh your coffee, whatever it might be. And then when you get back to that list, going to your next batch of 1, 2, or 3 things that you're going to be doing. Before I go into some others, I'm just going to pause. Do you have any questions?
No, it's all good. I did, how I was saying, like last night, I just did things differently. Like I deleted Netflix off my phone because that's like when that's my low hanging fruit, right?
Yes.
I like just rewatching the same shows over and over and over. And that's what I would do. And I'm like, no, I'm deleting it. This is like a time suck. Like I want to read before bed. I want to do these other things. And that I know that this is draining me. This is distracting me. I'm not getting things done as quickly as I could. Like even like cooking dinner. If I put on a Netflix show, I like lollygag while I'm like doing it.
Yeah.
So I deleted it yesterday and I'm like, so this is like good timing. So I'm like noticing some of those things because I'll go through habits. It like ebbs and flows, and then you get into this habit of like doing these things that feel good. And then somehow you get sucked back in and you're like, why? Like that felt so good when I was like, putting those splashes in my cup and I was feeling better in the morning and getting tasks done easier. And now like, how did I get sucked back into this? So I love everything that you're talking about.
But I think that a really important word that you said is like being intentional, right? So everything that I ever talk about on, in conversations like this, really it all just boils down to getting super intentional.
Right.
And I would never ever guide a client or any mother to cut Netflix out of their lives 100%. No, unless that was something that they really wanted to do, because we get to have little joys like that, and they feel even better when we're super intentional about them and it's not just something that's mindless. Which for me goes back a lot to that unproductive time. I don't necessarily think that sitting down and watching a TV show is unproductive time. If it's mindless and, if you feel like it's not serving you, then that's kind of where it crosses the line into being unproductive.
Yeah. For me, it was like, I don't need it on my phone. Like,
yeah,
and also I don't want to like model that for my kids. Like my kids don't have handheld devices. So I'm like, if they're watching me watch things on my phone, like what is that saying to them?
Yeah.
Like also versus like being present with what's going on and, things like that. So for me, it was also wanting to like, being like, okay, if I really like, want to be intentional, even with like my time with the kids, or different things, just wanting to model for them because that's like a huge issue and another one in our society today, just monkey see, monkey do. So if your kids see you glued to your phone all day, like no wonder they want to be on devices all day. That's what we're showing them. So yeah, for me, I'm like, I have no problem. Like last night, after the kids were in bed, came down, my husband's watching sports. I sat on the couch, read a book, or we'll watch something together. Like I have no problem putting something on the TV. If I'm folding laundry, like, whatever, but I don't need a portable device.
Yeah.
with it on there for myself personally.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, that's why I was like, okay, Liz, this gotta go. Especially, the next baby's coming. And like that's the thing too. I'm like, I don't want to be like laying in bed, brand new baby, watching Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Especially when like baby goes down and you have like an hour or two before baby's going to be up again. Like
right.
that time is probably so much better spent reading or sleeping. Might
Resting.
I
Yeah.
say sleeping.
Right. Right.
um and there is science that shows that the light from our phones and other devices tricks our brain into thinking that it's time to stay awake and
Totally.
not time to, start preparing for rest.
Right.
And when we are in the newborn stage and infant stage, mom really needs that rest. It's your body's healing and you are the primary provider for this little tiny adorable infant. God, talking about this, I'm like, how is my baby already one?
I know. I know. It's so crazy how fast it goes. Like, and I think when you have your second one, that's like when you notice it so much more. Cause like
Yes.
at the age my second one was, and my second one is right now, we had a newborn. So like,
Hmm.
and she looked like such a big girl, like compared to her. But you look at photos and I'm
Yes.
like, she was a baby. Like she was a baby too. And you just like, I don't want to miss that. Like you get it, time does fly and our kids are hilarious. Like it's so funny. Yeah, yesterday Jovi was pooping. And yeah, she turned 3 in September. And she's like, Mom, why does pee come out of my vulva and poop come out of my butt? And I'm like, oh my gosh,
I
like just,
love that.
yeah, the funniest things. And like, how are you already thinking about these
Like,
things? Like,
where did that thought even come from? Oh my gosh.
yeah,
It
they're
is,
so funny.
there is something about the second where it really did go by so much faster. And
Mm-hmm.
to your point, I was looking at, obviously my son just turned 1. So I've been looking back on all of the pictures and everything. And when we first brought him home, like my oldest was just this small little girl. And I remember thinking at that point, like, God, she's huge. Like, because at that point she was almost 2. Like, she wasn't
Right.
even 2 yet. And I was
Right.
having these thoughts of like, she's such a big girl. But no, they're all just still babies. And oh,
I know.
I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited too. I know we could probably reminisce about our kids forever. It is. I mean, everybody always
Yeah.
does say time is a thief, but it's also like such a gift. And that's like, I think what all of this ties into is like task management. Like when we can like allegate certain things, like that, the time that it leaves us to be more present with our children or
Yeah.
to, even when tasks are interrupted, um, when you kind of have a plan for that day, it
Yeah.
helps versus like winging it, which is what I do a lot.
100%. And, I'm going to say it again, like it's all about being very intentional. So if you set up your day with some sort of structure, and it does not have to be rigid. I think that a lot of times, um, time and task management, routines, systems have this connotation of being rigid.
Yeah.
And I think that that is just so far from the truth because what I actually believe is that any goal that you set, any habit, any routine that you're trying to create should include a decent amount of fluidity. Because one thing that we should always expect is unexpected things to happen.
Yeah.
And when we're setting ourselves up to be these rigid beings, to have these rigid routines, that is how we put ourselves in a situation to not be able to sustain them. Um, and so, one of the things that I talk about, I don't like necessarily just saying that, I guide women on building routines. No, I guide women on building sustainable routines because if we're going to put the time and energy into creating a routine, whether that routine is a morning routine or an exercise and movement routine or a weekend routine that helps you prepare for a new week. No matter what this routine is, if we're putting the energy into creating it, let's create it the right way and let's create it in a way that you are going to be able to sustain it, because what is the most difficult and what also makes us feel like we're not able to be a routines person is a stop start stop start stop start. That is exhausting, you
Yeah.
know. um so having that flexibility when having a game plan, I think, is absolutely vital.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like your attitude approaching it too, because like when you have this like super strict, very rigid schedule and it gets derailed, it's easy to let yourself get derailed
Mhm.
versus like leaving room for life, right? Like
Exactly.
life
Yeah.
happens. Like yesterday, I had to call my vet because my dog is like going through some stuff. And we
Oh.
were there a couple weeks ago and the treatment didn't work. So I called again and talked to him on the phone and he's like, you need to come pick up these prescriptions today. Like I don't live that close to them, but like I
Mhm.
knew that that was like gonna cut into like prepping for dinner and then my husband had a work call, but I'm like, I
Yeah.
have to go get these prescriptions, like, you know, um,
Exactly.
and everything's going to work out. It's going to be fine. But routine is, again, something that I lack in my life. Not that we don't have one. Like, obviously, we have like certain things, you know, I think the evening routine is probably the most prominent one in our house.
Mhm.
You know, we do our routine with the girls before bed and kind of do the same things and get ready and have them in bed roughly around the same time every night. So, for me, I know I would benefit greatly from a morning routine. What I find is this season of life. I mean, it's about to get rocked because my third will be here soon. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm so tired. Like I don't wake up before my kids. My second wakes up at 6:30 every morning,
Mhm.
and I'm not willing to wake up before that. So,
Yeah.
because my 3-year-old also doesn't sleep through the night. So, we're up with her every night. Um,
Mhm.
my second sleeps great for the most part. Um, and I'm just like tired, you know, of being pregnant. So
Absolutely.
my second kid is my alarm clock. And I usually grab her and bring her into bed and like we kind of nurse and snuggle and go back to sleep. And then we just kind of like mornings take me forever to get
Yeah.
downstairs. All the bedrooms are upstairs, like our living space is downstairs. And before we come downstairs, like we make our beds. So we do that. Like we make our beds, we brush our teeth, we get our clothes ready for the day. It takes us forever though. Like my husband will call us
Yeah.
and he's like, it's 9 o'clock, Liz. Like you haven't eaten breakfast yet. And I'm like, I'm making it right now. Like, so I know that there would be something beneficial to me, like having a little pep in my step in the
Yeah.
morning,
Yeah.
you know,
You're
and
like, "How do I put this?"
yeah, like getting my day started
Yeah.
is tough. Um, for me. So I know that that would be like, because then it does cut into other things. Like there's been
Mhm.
so many days where I'm like, oh, I should like, tomorrow I'm going to wake up. It's nice out, like go for a walk, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like 10 o'clock and I'm like, we have to go to our next
Yeah.
thing. And like, how is it 10 o'clock in the morning? And like, we just finished eating breakfast and cleaning up and
Yeah.
whatever for the day. So I know that that's like an area in my life that's like, could, could change greatly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I don't think, or not, I don't think, I know that you're not alone in
Yeah.
feeling like that. Like mornings are probably the biggest struggle day part um that I find when I'm working with moms. Um my very first suggestion here is to get really clear on the why behind your what. So in this instance, the what would be having some sort of m- I'm going to say morning routine. I'm not suggesting like a full-blown morning routine, some sort of morning habits or whatever it might be, but getting really clear on why it is you want to have those. Because what happens is when we get very gung-ho at the beginning about creating any sort of routine, this is why New Year's resolutions, more times than not, uh, just fall by the wayside. It's because we get very excited. We have this mentality of like going just totally all in on it, and like I'm gonna do this, this, and this. But what we lack is being able to connect with a deeper meaning behind the things that we're wanting to do. Because when that excitement, when the newness and shininess of this new routine fades, and it will, we're going to need something a little bit stronger, a little bit deeper to get us out of bed in the morning, to get ourselves to the gym, whatever it might be. And so that's why I suggest the very first thing that we do when creating any sort of new routine in your day, any really it's even bigger than that. Any form of, personal self-development that you're trying to do is to get really clear on the why behind your what. I was having a conversation with a gal the other day. Her name's Rebecca. That's not part of the story, but she just is an amazing person. And the way she puts it is the why that makes you cry. So like the deep, deep down, like, I want to be the best mom in the world so that I can show my kids, you can create a world that you are so happy in, and like you can just be this amazing person, and I want to model that, where it just brings you to tears. Like that is how much you want it. That's the why that I'm talking about. Those are the feelings that will help you, get out of bed 15 minutes earlier in the morning. And that leads me kind of to another suggestion that I would have in a situation like this. I mentioned earlier, I see mornings and evenings as going hand in hand. And
Right.
when we talk about trying to, get out of bed a little bit earlier, well, it's not fair to ask ourselves to do that if we're not turning out the light a little bit earlier also. So a lot of times I was actually just talking to a client about this earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, it doesn't matter. About turning off the light 15 minutes earlier in the evening, and then setting your alarm for 15 minutes earlier in the morning, and just taking this slow baby step approach. Rome wasn't built in a day. If it had been, it probably would not still be around standing. That's because it has a solid foundation. And that's how we get to create solid foundations. Baby steps are going to snowball into bigger progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've realized too, like there's other things in the evening that like help me out the next day. Um, like if I pick out the girls' clothes the night before,
Yeah,
it takes me 2 seconds, but for some reason when I do it the next morning, it's like this long task.
I'm right there with you.
And it's like, instead of, I actually did that the other day. I had like Tula's outfit ready. So then I like described it and I'm like, all right, let's go downstairs.
Yeah,
Versus being like, oh, what should they wear? What's the weather again? What are we doing? You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it takes
yeah.
me for some reason forever. So I'm like, that's something that is so simple that takes me 2 minutes at night, but cuts
hmm
off like 15 minutes in the morning.
Isn't it wild? And so my daughter is at the age right now, she's almost 3, so she very much so has an opinion on what she
Yes.
wears. On Sunday, I'll pull out 5 outfits. And each day out of those 5, I'll give her 2 options, and she gets to pick which one of those. And I don't do this every week, but the weeks that I do it, it's so much easier getting her dressed in the morning. But the worst part for her is come Friday, she only has the one option. And so I try to do it like as fast as I can. Like, okay, I pull it out, no room for negotiation here. Let's get out of jammies. Yes, you can have your lovey. We're putting this on and it's time for breakfast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I feel like, yeah, there's things you can do in advance that like cut that time off for
Yeah,
sure. And clothes is one of them for
absolutely.
me. Even for myself, if I just like, I mean, I wear leggings and a sweatshirt every day. It shouldn't be that hard.
Right.
But
But
it
which black
is.
leggings for today?
Well, and for some reason in this pregnancy, like I've had some leggings just go missing. Like, I'm like,
No.
where are these clothes? So, and I'll wear like a pair of leggings more than once before I wash them. So I'm like, are
Yeah.
these wearable again? Do I need to get a new pair? Like,
Right. Right.
just going through it. So I'm like, Liz, come on. Yeah, it's not that hard. So, um, yeah, today we got down quick because we laid in bed for a long time. So it didn't take us very long to to get downstairs. So I know it's
Yeah.
possible.
You're like, we have
Um,
this in us. We can
right.
do it. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I know, yeah, having a third will change things for a little bit, but then I think having a routine is also going to make it like so much easier because, I'm really going to like try to rest as much postpartum as I can this time. We have like, some family helping, and but like once I don't have that help anymore,
Yeah.
having a
Yeah.
routine is going to be like vital.
And starting to practice now, I think would only help when it does come to the time when, family has gone home and it's just you and your immediate family. So there is research shows that there's a couple of prime times to start new routines. Um, and one of them is when big life events occur. So when you're maybe go through a career change or a physical move from one city to another, having a child. So there is going to be part of your brain that is primed to be like willing and open to starting new routine just because like this huge life event happened. So my suggestion for you is to like take advantage of that and maybe going into it, have an idea of what you want that routine to look like. Again, like making sure you have the flexibility in there because, anything can happen when baby is born. But I think the most important part would be being really clear on the why behind that routine. And, for a while, it could be so that you have the most time to rest and so that you have the most time to, pour into this new precious baby. Um, but start now. Start now.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. I'm like, I should just start, later.
So
I know, I do
I
need to.
love cheesy analogies. Like, God, I love a good cheesy analogy. I also love dad jokes. But anyway, what I was gonna say is this isn't so much of an analogy, more I guess of a proverb, but I think it's so true when we talk about setting goals, building routines, starting habits. The best time to plant a tree was 40 years ago. The second best time is now.
Hmm.
And so I find myself saying that very regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the why that makes you cry though, because I do have those.
Yeah.
So I feel like getting like, maybe even writing those down or like tapping into that. It's like, okay, you know, this is why.
Yep.
And being able to do it.
Yeah.
Um, since this episode's coming out in the new year, I feel like it's really good timing because, as you said before, most resolutions don't make it. We, especially like when you plan these like huge, crazy goals, not saying
Yeah.
that it's impossible. Um, but if you don't have like a lot of things, if you don't have
Hmm.
the time, the energy, the resources, the grit, the sustainability to like do these things, they are going to fall off really quickly.
Yeah.
So maybe for moms entering the new year who are similar to me and like struggle with these things, or um I did get it, and it is seasons too, because for a season I was really, really good. I had a chore chart for myself, and it was so easy for me to keep the house clean because it didn't take long. It was like 45 minutes a day,
Hmm.
and that was easy.
Yeah.
um but eventually that like changed. Um uh so like, do you have some tips maybe going into the new year for people who really, really, really want to work on time management. As I said at the beginning, like I feel like that's been like
Yeah.
my goal for like 5 years. I'm like, manage your time better, Liz.
Yeah.
Or like build a good routine, because they know that if they just got up in the morning and went for that short walk and then had their coffee, that their day would be different.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah, just for some tips for moms who are like, this all sounds great in theory, would love to do that.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
I know I
Yeah.
feel great when I do that, but I also feel like I'm drowning sometimes, and I'm not sure like how to make this sustainable for myself.
Yeah. So the first thing, especially going into a new year when we are, so again, like starting a new year is another time that our brains are just primed. Something about just flipping that calendar. That's why we find ourselves saying, oh, next week I'll start, or next month I'll start. It's because our brains are primed for that. But the first thing I would do is identify how you individually view accountability. Okay. So there's most likely you're going to view accountability either inwardly, like you feel very accountable just to yourself. You tell yourself you're going to do something and you do it. For people who find themselves following through on New Year's resolutions, there's a good chance that inward accountability is your jam. The other one would be outward accountability. Do you need a deadline? Do you need an accountability partner? That would be like more leaning into the outward accountability. And then there's going to be the type of people who need both of those, right? Who kind of, like the Venn diagram, and they're that middle part with it's a healthy combination of both. And so with the new year, um, knowing what type, just knowing how you naturally lean into accountability is going to help set you up for success with any, big goal, big habit, big routine that you're wanting to implement in the new year. So if you are like, oh yeah, outward accountability is definitely what I need. You mentioned a chore chart. Even, tracking habits is a form of outward accountability. Set yourself up for success from the very beginning. When you are outlining what you want this routine, whatever it might be, to look like, build in accountability if that's something that you're going to need. Find a friend who has a similar goal. Find a friend who is going to, check in and make sure that you're doing the things that you said that you were going to do. Download an app, hire a coach, whatever it is that you're going to need to find that accountability, that should be built in from the beginning, because having that accountability is another thing that's going to help you sustain something for the long run. And again, we already said this once in this conversation, the start, stop gets exhausting, and it makes us feel like I can't do this. You
Right.
can do it. We just have to set you up for success from the get-go. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, I am a really big fan of taking a baby step approach. I mentioned it with the 15-minute increments to help yourself get up earlier. If you have a big goal, if you have a big routine that you're wanting to start or accomplish in the new year, break that down so small. I like to think of it as subtasks. Let's use the example of like painting a room in your house. I don't know, painting a nursery. You don't just go to Lowe's and grab a can of paint and start painting the nursery. No, there's all of these small things that you have to do leading up to it, right? You get samples, you throw them up on the wall, you see what they look like different times of day with the different sunlights and all of the things. And then once you land on a color, you have to scooch all the furniture to the middle and put plastic wrap around and tape up at the ceilings. And you have to buy all the equipment that you need. And the list goes on and on. And so if you have something that you're wanting to do that is a huge task, such as painting a room, chances are you're going to keep putting that task off and off and off because it feels like such a huge undertaking. It feels like it's going to take so much time that, we tell ourselves, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. But in reality, if we break it down to each of those or if we break it down into the subtasks, the bite-sized pieces, the baby steps, whatever phrase or word that you want to use for it, all of a sudden it becomes a project that we can start, chipping away at and making progress on. It doesn't all have to happen at the same time. You do not have to carve out 12 hours one weekend to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so yeah, those would be my two suggestions going into the new year. Or understand yourself and how you view accountability, and break down those big aspirations into smaller bite-sized pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. With the accountability thing, I guess I never really thought of that before. And I think I definitely am an outward accountability person.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I have to have something to like show up to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why so when I always got like straight A's my entire life, I did one semester of online courses and did terribly. And then I showed up the next semester, straight A's. And I was like, I can't do my online work is not good. And same with after I had my second baby, I signed up for the half marathon because I'm like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. And so I'm like, I signed up with a partner. She and I were going to run it together. I couldn't let her down. She's not going to run it by herself. I don't want her to run it by herself.
Yeah.
And, I did the workouts on my own. I went for the runs, and it's because I had to. And I'm like, okay, I just kept thinking about the goal at the end. But I definitely need to set up some sort of outside accountability system. I feel like I can. Obviously, part of that was holding myself. I ran every single day for the half marathon. But I also had signed up, and I knew that I paid for it. I knew I had to go. And so I definitely need an outside accountability source. So I'll have to find that, because I feel like it's also hard. My husband would totally do it, but I would just get pissed at him. So, so I need an outside source. I'll be like, babe, at the end of the week, ask me this question. And then I'll be like, shut up. You don't even understand. You don't get it.
You don't get it. No. So it's funny because in my experience, spouses or partners are not great accountability partners. And I think it's because we feel so close to them, almost like they're an extension of ourselves. And if you truly need that outward accountability, then your partner is just not far enough removed from you. But hearing you talk about the half marathon that you signed up for and the friend that you signed up for it with, I actually see two forms of outward accountability there. First, obviously, your friend, your training partner who you're going to run with, but second, the financial commitment of having registered for the event. So for a lot of people who lean into the outward accountability, financial commitments are very important for them. I think it's why, I think it's why having some sort of paid coach that you're working with, or what's the word that I'm looking for? I'm losing it. But or paying for a membership, maybe not a membership, but a 10 class pack at a boutique studio, something like that that's going to expire in 2 months, however long it might be. Having that financial commitment. Well, I already paid for these 10 classes and I have to use them in the next 60 days. So I'm going to get my booty there and on that bike, or, on that mat, whatever it might be.
Right.
So
but you see that even in the type of work that we do. So if you have your own business and you have something where you take clients, I've also realized if I'm going to do a free event, people are much likely they'll sign up but not show up. But if they're doing a paid
100%.
event, they are going to be accountable. They're well, I paid for this. I'm going to show up. And if I can't, I'm for sure rewatching the video.
Exactly. They have skin in the game.
Right. Right. So I know that was something that I also had to work through with charging people for my doula services, and things like that.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to have free doula care, but it's okay, but also that's hours of preparation, hours away from my family, childcare, like so many things go
Yeah.
into it. And not that people don't like value it, but they're more likely to if they're invested in it.
That's
So,
so true.
versus them being like, oh, well, I just decided to like get induced, so I didn't call you. I just got induced and got an epidural, so I didn't like whatever, and it's like, cool, I wasn't like waiting by my phone forever for you to call.
For you to say you're going into labor and
Had backup childcare ready to go. Like I didn't rearrange my life at all for this. So it's, yeah, for sure. Like, so talking about this then, like, how do you work with people?
Yeah, so I work with people on, in a one-to-one capacity. I'm also in the process of launching a group program called Mom Life. I had hit the pause button on it. So I had originally envisioned it being a month-to-month membership. But it just like was not sitting well with me. I was like, what is it? I loved all the content that I had in it, and it's a hybrid approach to coaching, so it's a little bit of group and a little bit of one-on-one. And then I finally realized it was because of the way I had set it up as a month to month. um and I don't believe that the like transformation or whatever it might be, I don't believe that building a truly sustainable routine, that getting moms the results that I was wanting could happen in a month. I think it takes a lot more time. So I hit the pause button, and hopefully by the time this episode airs, it will be close to actually rolling out. So that'll be a really great group program. It's looking like it'll be a 6-month program that'll focus a lot on time and task management for moms, building habits and routines for moms and families, and using good time management, solid routines as a way to ensure that mom has the time and the energy to keep her own cup full also. So yeah, that's how I work with people.
That's awesome. And I want to point out too, so I know like one excuse that I'll make for myself sometimes is like, I am a full-time stay-at-home mom, but I also have a podcast and I'm working on my course and I'm
Yep.
doing other things. So working from home is hard. And I've told myself sometimes, if I didn't work from home, if like my only job was to focus on the kids, I would be so much better at this. But that time feels up too. Like no matter if you are a working mom, a working from home mom, a part-time working mom, or a full-time stay-at-home mom, that time and that space fills up so quickly. It's endless. All of it's endless for all of us.
Yeah.
And so telling myself that, I'm like, I know that that's a lie. Like there were times where all I was doing was like recording a couple episodes a week and had time to focus on other things, and I didn't have time then to do the things that so it's like I actually, talking about the accountability thing, I function better like when I worked a full-time job. Like my husband and I have talked about this. I'm like, when I worked a full-time job that I clocked in, clocked out, and went home, I was more productive. And I think it's just that, like, I don't know if it's that accountability thing or it's like, you only have so many hours. I didn't have kids, but it was so much easier.
Whole different. You're like, oh wait, I didn't have kids. I was so productive.
I know. That's a big one. But even like after, like, I don't know, like it hits different. Like, we're all filling up our time with something.
Absolutely.
And we all have time to put splashes in our cup. You might not think so, but you do. Like you said something earlier about like, you may want to do this, but you're not. And that's like something my husband always told me too, like even with the marathon training, that's like, I can't run today. He's like, you can, you just don't want to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so true. And we don't have like that accountability, like with each other, like just to call each other out. Like most people don't. And especially as moms, like we empathize with each other, right? It's like, I get it. They're like, I just can't do this. And you're like, I understand. But a lot of times it is, right? But a lot of times it is, you don't want to, and that's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay
exactly.
to
See,
not want to.
I love that you said that because it all is okay.
Right.
Having a heavy amount of grace that we allow ourselves goes so far, literally so far. And I think that when we do give ourselves the space to just say, like, I don't want to do it today,
Right.
that's okay, because, like, I saw something on Instagram the other day. I actually reposted it, and it said, on days that you only have 30% available to give to your kids and you give them that 30%, you're really giving 100% of what you
Yeah.
had available. And that was kind of like a mic drop for me. Like literally, it just gave me chills saying it again, because all that is this, it's a reframe, right? You're giving what you have, and that's going to look different each day. It's going to look different each day how much you have available to give to yourself also. And there's this practice that I talk about. It's called a 15-minute happiness bucket list. And essentially what it is it's a list of 50 things that you can do inside of 15 minutes or less that add splashes to your cup. And it's hard to think of 50 things that you can do
Yeah.
inside of 15 minutes or less. But once you have that list, you have this toolbox, an arsenal of little things that you can do for those tiny splashes. And guess what? Some of those things are like literally 30 seconds. Like, ah, we have we have the time. We just need to identify it and become intentional about using it to give ourselves splashes.
Right. Right. Exactly. Before we wrap up, I love the name Think Happy.
Oh,
That's such
thank
a great
you.
name for your company. Um, Tell us where people can find you, follow you, connect with you, and about your podcast as well.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, at thinkhappy_co. My podcast is called the Think Happy Podcast. I like to joke that, it's not that I'm not creative. I'm just really great at branding. Like all
Yeah,
of my stuff is literally called the same
that is
thing.
good branding.
No.
You should
So yeah,
actually
those are the
like
two
keep
primary
everything the
places.
same, like you
Yeah.
should keep it, makes it so much easier for people to find you.
It does. And also, I'm just not that creative. When I landed on Think Happy, I was like, this is it. It's got to be everywhere. This is the best I'm going to ever come up with. Um, but yeah, podcast, the Think Happy Podcast, Instagram at thinkhappy_co. And my website is thinkhappyco.com. So come hang out, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I'm excited for everyone to hear this.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.